Only one person in the state could order the Ellery Dam spillway opened. She was standing in freezing rain 12 feet from a National Guard barricade, soaked to the knees, mud across the side of her face, while a 22-year-old soldier told her she could not pass. "My name is Yvette Marchand," she said. "I am the governor of this state." Private First Class Cody Reese looked at the battered county pickup behind her, then at the woman in front of him. "No, ma'am." 71 minutes remained before engineers expected Ellery Dam to lose structural stability. Open the spillway too early, and 400 homes in the lower valley would be swallowed. Wait too long, and 11,000 people would find themselves beneath a wall of water no evacuation plan had ever been built to outrun. Yvette wiped the rain out of her eyes. "Son, listen to me very carefully." Cody tightened his grip on his radio. "My orders are that nobody passes checkpoint 9. I understand. Nobody." "I understand that too." "Then turn the truck around." She looked past him at the mountain road, disappearing into rain. Somewhere beyond those trees was the Emergency Operations Center. Somewhere beyond that was the dam. And somewhere inside the dam, concrete older than Cody's grandparents had already begun to move. 20 minutes earlier, this same young man had turned away a state police captain, who argued with him for 11 minutes. Nobody would think about that again for 3 months. At 7:10 that morning, the National Weather Service upgraded the rainfall estimate. At 8:17, the Blue River crossed flood stage. By 10, mountain roads that had carried school buses at dawn were vanishing beneath streams that had not existed the day before. Governor Yvette Marchand was 61, a former county prosecutor, the daughter of a railroad electrician and a school secretary, and the first black woman elected governor in the state's history. Newspapers liked that sentence. She rarely did. History sounded clean printed under a photograph. Living inside it was mostly committee rooms where people forgot she was chairing the meeting, and strangers at events asking whether she was the governor's assistant. This morning did not feel historic. It felt wet. At 10:27, a civil engineer named Dr. Henry Bell came into the underground operations room carrying a yellow folder, and she knew from his face before he opened his mouth. Ellery. The room went quiet. Ellery Dam sat 53 miles north, holding back a reservoir built after the flood of 1952. Everyone in the state knew its curved concrete face from school trips and postcards. People fished there. Families picnicked there. It had survived 7 decades, 3 hurricanes, and generations of governors who liked standing in front of it when infrastructure money was announced. Bell laid out 3 photographs. Muddy water boiling through a drainage channel, a crack running across a service gallery, and a screen of instrument readings. Movement. Not much. Millimeters. That was the frightening thing about large structures. They did not have to move far before the consequences became enormous. The reservoirs rising faster than the controlled outlets can drop it. Debris blocking 2 intakes. The eastern abutment is taking pressure we have never measured. How long? We don't know. Henry. 90 minutes before I stop being willing to tell you the dam is stable. Nobody moved. Options. Open spillway 3. Colonel Andrew Cass folded his arms. And send the water where? The map shifted. Blue spread across a thin strip of countryside. 412 structures. Farms. A church. A feed store. A row of small houses along Mill Creek where families had lived 30 feet above what everyone had always believed was high water. How deep? 6 to 12 feet. People? Evacuation started an hour ago. Complete? No. And if we don't open it? Bell changed the map. The blue expanded across roads, schools, entire blocks of towns. 11,300 in the corridor. Yvette turned to the Attorney General. Authority. State Water Emergency Act, Section 19. Because the release knowingly inundates occupied private property, it requires the governor's personal authorization. Lieutenant Governor, only if you're formally incapacitated or unreachable. I'm standing here. Then it's yours. There are decisions politicians like to picture making. The cameras, the history books, the sentence that begins when the moment came. Real ones are usually 2 bad choices on a folding table, while wet people wait to find out which families lose something. How long to clear the lower valley? Cass answered. 45 minutes if the roads hold. And Ellery? Bell looked at the clock. 86. Then we use 45. A deputy director looked up, startled. You're waiting? I'm evacuating. It was the correct decision, and it was a wager, and she would spend the next 3 months trying to explain the difference to people who did not want to hear it. At 11:47, she climbed into a state helicopter with Special Agent David Kim, her Deputy Chief of Staff Leah Benton, and 2 communications officers. They never left the ground. Lightning kept flashing beyond the western ridge. The pilot waited 9 minutes and shut the engines down. No safe window. The convoy made it 13 miles before a creek came across the road, so fast that a trooper who had crossed it a quarter hour earlier refused to try again. They reversed. The second route ended under a fallen oak. The third brought them to a volunteer fire station outside a town called Harrow, where 12 firefighters were coordinating rescues on paper maps because their internet was gone. A woman in rubber boots handed the governor coffee in a foam cup. You look cold. I am. Good. Means you still have feeling. Her secure phone found 1 bar. 2 messages arrived, then nothing. Ellery movement increasing. Recommend governor present at forward EOC. Lower Valley evac 61%. David Kim stood beside a mud-splattered county public works pickup. That can make the forestry road. The fire chief raised a hand. Counties. Smells like wet dog and pulls left. It'll climb. Leah stared at it. Governor? You're going to arrive at the State Emergency Command Center in that. If we're lucky. They left Harrow at 12:29, Leah driving, Yvette in the middle, David beside the door with a county radio between his knees. Rain erased the mountains. Twice they drove through moving water. The GPS froze. Leah's phone died. At 12:46, they reached a fork that did not exist on the paper map. Left, Yvette said. How do you know? I campaigned through here in 22. The church on the left had a sign for a turkey supper. That was 4 years ago. 3 minutes later, they passed the church. The sign was still there. Leah laughed once. I am never arguing with you about directions again. You will? For 30 seconds, the cab felt almost normal. Then David's radio came alive. Ellery control to state EOC. Displacement increased. Repeat. Displacement increased. Yvette took the microphone. Ellery control, this is Governor Marchand. Respond. A voice surfaced under the static. Unable, authenticate, channel. Gone. She did not know it yet, but that single word, authenticate, was going to cost her 41 minutes. Orange barriers crossed the road under a portable floodlight. A Humvee sat beside a canvas shelter. Emergency control point 9. Authorized movement only. The soldier who stepped into the rain looked young enough that Yvette's first instinct was to ask whether he should be out here alone. Identification. David showed his state security credential. Leah showed hers. Yvette handed over her license and her gubernatorial credential. He looked down at them under the light. He looked back at her, then at the battered pickup. His face changed, not impressed. Something else. Where is your escort? Separated by flooding. Why aren't you on the guard movement list? I don't know. Remain in the vehicle. 12:53, 71 minutes. Cody Reese had joined the Guard 10 months earlier. His mother worked nights at an assisted living center. His father repaired refrigeration units, and had spent most of Cody's childhood saying that any job worth doing was worth doing correctly. He had been posted to Checkpoint 9 at 9 that morning. At 11:30, his orders changed. No civilian movement north. At 12:12, they changed again. No movement of any kind without confirmation through Guard Command. No exceptions for elected officials. No exceptions for law enforcement. No exceptions for anyone claiming emergency authority. A state police captain had argued with him at 12:30 and been turned back. Command later confirmed Cody was right. Now a black woman in a muddy county truck was telling him she was the governor. He had seen Governor Marchand on television. Dark suits, podiums, flags, bright lights. The woman in the truck had rain running down her neck and clay on one shoe. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. Cody did not trust ordinary things during a disaster. He keyed his radio. Checkpoint 9 to ransom control. Priority authentication request. Static. He tried again. Nothing. Yvette opened the truck door. Ma'am, remain inside. I need to speak to you. You can speak from there. I have spent 30 years talking through windows to young men who think the glass makes them safer. He blinked. She stepped down into the rain. What is your name? Private First Class Cody Reese. You have written orders? Yes, ma'am. Show me. I'm not authorized to show operational orders. Fair answer. That surprised him. She pointed at his radio. Can you reach Colonel Cass? Not directly. Fort Ransom operations? I'm trying. She took a card from her wallet, then called the governor's direct emergency line. He looked at the number. Anybody could memorize a phone number. Leah exhaled sharply. Yvette raised a hand to stop her. You're right. Now he looked genuinely uncertain. Excuse me? A phone number doesn't prove identity. Rain ran off the rim of his helmet, but the person who answers it can. Civilian phone systems down. Then use the satellite unit. That's command equipment. So is the road. His face hardened. My orders are clear. Then verify the order. I'm attempting to. How long have you been attempting? 3 minutes. We don't have 3 minutes. Everybody says that today. She stared at him and found no contempt there, no arrogance. Only a young man terrified of making the wrong call, holding on to the one solid thing anyone had given him. Instructions. She knew that fear. Government ran on it more than anyone admitted. Someone writes a rule in a calm room. Someone else carries it into chaos. Then reality shows up and demands judgment from a person nobody prepared to exercise it. 67 minutes. Private Reese. Under state law, I am the only person who can authorize the Ellery release while I remain able to serve. Then command should know where you are. They thought I was in a helicopter. Were you? For 11 minutes. His mouth almost moved. It didn't make it. Ma'am, I cannot let you through because you tell me it's serious. I cannot let you through because your staff says so. I cannot let you through because your identification looks real. We were briefed this morning that emergency credentials can be copied. She glanced at David. He nodded slightly. It was true. If I open this barricade, and you are not who you say you are, I put unauthorized people directly into a restricted command zone. And if you don't, I follow my orders. That is not what I asked. For the first time, he looked away. If you don't let me through, Private Reese, and I am exactly who I say I am, what happens? I don't know. That's the correct answer. And because you don't know, you verify. I am trying. Try differently. It stung. Not because she said it hard, but because his father had said almost the same thing to him at 12 years old over a rusted lawnmower bolt. Stop proving the wrench doesn't work, and try differently. He walked to the Humvee and started cycling channels. Guard tactical. Nothing. County emergency. Overlapping voices. Ransom control. Static. A mountain relay. A sheriff answered, then vanished. 63 minutes. Leah came up close to her. This is insane. He's keeping the governor out of the emergency center. He's keeping an unverified vehicle out of a restricted zone. You are standing in front of him. That's obvious to us. Governor. Leah. Do not ask a 22-year-old to break a direct order because we're important. We're not important. The dam is. Exactly. She rubbed her cold hands together and thought about the lower valley. Mill Creek Baptist. The feed store. A diner where she'd eaten blueberry pie during the campaign. A white farmhouse with a porch swing where an 82-year-old widow named Frances Alden had told her she'd voted Republican since Eisenhower, but liked her anyway. You remind me of my sister. Is that good? Depends on the day. Yvette wondered whether Frances had gotten out. She would still be wondering when she signed. At Fort Ransom, Bell watched 3 lines climb. Movement increased again. Cass looked at the door. Where is the governor? Nobody knew. The convoy had lost her after Harrow. The helicopter was grounded. Her phone hadn't touched a network in 38 minutes. The lieutenant governor was at a hospital evacuation 70 miles south. The attorney general said the word out loud. Succession. Not yet. Colonel, if she is unreachable. Unreachable is not incapacitated. Bell looked at the clock. 58 minutes. At the checkpoint, Cody finally raised another post. Checkpoint 7, this is 9. I need a command relay. Emergency executive authentication. Silence. Then, repeat? He looked at Yvette, standing under the floodlight in the rain. Individual claims to be Governor Marchand. Checkpoint 7 laughed, not cruelly, just stress finding the wrong exit. You've got the governor? That is what I am trying to determine. Does she look like the governor? Cody studied her. She heard the question. So far, he said, she looks wet. Yvette laughed. She couldn't help it. Leah stared. Even Cody smiled for half a second. Then the relay came through, and a voice she didn't know said, Checkpoint 9, identify. Reese, Cody, Bravo Company. Authorization Green Niner 4. I have 3 individuals claiming executive movement priority. One identifies as Governor Yvette Marchand. The radio went silent. Distant voices. Then another man. Checkpoint 9. Hold all personnel. Cody's shoulders dropped with relief. Yvette stepped forward. Who am I speaking to? This is Governor Marchand. Ma'am, whoever you are, remain off military communications until identity authentication is complete. She turned slowly and looked at Cody. He didn't look pleased. He looked apologetic. The command center didn't believe her either. She reached for the radio. He hesitated, then handed it over. This is Yvette Marchand. State Executive Identification Marchand 7 Alpha. Please provide current continuity authentication. She froze. Every morning during a declared emergency, the governor's protective transport received a rotating continuity phrase, stored in an encrypted terminal. It existed for exactly this situation. Impersonation, communication failure, emergency command transfer. And that terminal was in her official Suburban, on the wrong side of a flooded road 30 miles behind her. Authentication terminal is unavailable. Written challenge packet, same vehicle. Biometric key, secure phone has no network. Ma'am, without continuity authentication, we cannot recognize executive authority on this channel. She stared into the rain. Cody had not failed. The system was working exactly as designed. That was the problem. Can Colonel Cass authenticate me? He is on the Ellery engineering circuit. Put him on. Unable. You mean unwilling. I mean unable. 51 minutes. They had been at checkpoint 9 for 20. Yvette handed back the radio and walked under the canvas shelter, water dripping off her coat. There has to be another way, Leah said. There is. Someone who knows me. You have a whole state that knows you. Not well enough. She looked at David. Where is Ruth? He understood immediately. Ruth Delaney had been Yvette's chief of staff since before there was a governorship to be chief of staff to. 64. Sharp-tongued. Widowed twice. And one of perhaps 3 people alive who could tell Yvette was angry from the way she set down a coffee cup. She went to coordinate the nursing home evacuation this morning, Leah said. David checked the location sheet. His expression changed. She was in Lower Mercer. The valley the spillway would flood. Mercer County emergency. This is Governor Yvette Marchand calling for Ruth Delaney. Caller, identify. I just did. Authentication. Yvette almost laughed. Ask Ruth Delaney what she calls the governor when the governor is being unreasonable. A pause. What? She'll understand. Stand by. 47 minutes. The dispatcher came back 4 minutes later. Checkpoint 9. We have no contact with Delaney. Her last unit was evacuating residents along Mill Creek Road. What time? 12:20. It was 1:17. Find her. Governor. Find her. Cody said nothing. Yvette paced to the edge of the road, where rainwater ran in silver sheets along the ditch. She had built a career asking people to trust systems. Courts. Elections. Records. Verification. She still believed in them. But every system was built from assumptions about what the world would look like when it was needed. The governor would have her vehicle. The governor would have a phone. The governor would have her code. The radio would work. The road would exist. Then the storm came and removed each assumption, one at a time. You still can't open it? She asked. No, ma'am. Even now? Especially now? She turned. Explain. If the command network is broken enough that they can't verify you, then I can't decide I know better, because I want the problem to go away. Leah stared at him. Yvette didn't. That's a better answer than the one you gave me 30 minutes ago. What did I say 30 minutes ago? That you were following orders. I still am. No, now you know why. The radio burst. Checkpoint 9. County relay. We found Delaney's group. Put her on. Unable. Their truck is in moving water near Mill Creek. Rescue unit approaching. Yvette stopped breathing for a moment. Then a woman's voice, faint and torn by static. Yvette? She closed her eyes. Ruth, tell me you are not calling me from somewhere comfortable. She laughed once, and it came out almost like a sob. I'm standing at checkpoint 9. Why? Because apparently I look suspicious in a county truck. Cody lowered his eyes. Ruth, listen. Fort Ransom can't authenticate me. I don't have the continuity code. I need you to identify me. How? Yvette looked at Cody, then at Leah, then back at the radio. September 17th, 2019, St. Anne's Hospital parking garage. You and me. What did you give me? Leah frowned. David knew nothing. Cody certainly didn't. Static. Ruth's breathing, audible. A pocket watch. What was engraved inside? The signal faded. Ruth? Nothing. Ruth? Rescue team is repositioning. The dispatcher cut in. Hold. Yvette gripped the radio until her knuckles hurt. The watch had belonged to her husband. Thomas taught high school history for 31 years, hated political receptions, loved old jazz records, and burnt toast, and reading newspapers in print, because a screen lets the world interrupt you. He died at St. Anne's after a long illness, 4 years before she ran. On his last night, Ruth had driven her to the hospital because she was too shaken to drive herself. In the parking garage, Ruth handed her a pocket watch Thomas had given her weeks earlier to have repaired. He had asked her to engrave 6 words inside it. Yvette had never told anyone. The radio returned. Ruth's voice was weaker. For the mornings you come home. Yvette bowed her head. Those were the words. Thomas had known by then that there would not be many more mornings. He had not written goodbye, he had written home. Ruth, what did I say when you handed it to me? You said he wasted his money. She smiled through the rain. And what did you say? I said shut up and let somebody love you. Cody looked away. Leah wiped her face. Yvette raised the radio. Fort Ransom, did you copy? Static. Fort Ransom, did you copy? Checkpoint 9. This is Colonel Cass. She straightened. Andrew. I heard. Do you accept identity? A long pause. He understood exactly what he was being asked. Not whether he recognized her voice, but whether he was willing to put his name on replacing a formal authentication system with human testimony. Yes. State your basis. Visual credential verified by Guard personnel. Protective agent credential verified. Deputy Chief of Staff credential verified. Independent personal authentication by Ruth Delaney. Voice recognition by me. Conclusion. You are Governor Yvette Marchand. Cody's face changed. Not fear. Relief. He reached for the barricade. Then Fort Ransom came back. Governor, stand by. Ellery condition has deteriorated. She stopped. Bell's voice. We've revised the stability estimate. How long? 24 minutes. She had been at checkpoint 9 for 41. Evacuation status. Lower Valley, 94%. 3 unresolved addresses. Ruth? Her group is moving uphill. Rescue boat has contact. She exhaled. Cody, open it. Yes, ma'am. He pulled the first barrier. David took the second. Leah ran for the truck. Cody lifted the last one. Yvette started for the pickup, then stopped. Private Reese, you did not recognize me. No, ma'am. You did not trust my identification. No, ma'am. You kept me here 41 minutes. His face fell. Yes, ma'am. And you followed the order you were given. She let it sit. That does not make the 41 minutes disappear, but it matters. She climbed in. Cody stood in the rain as they drove through. And then he put the barricade back, because his orders still said nobody else passed. The road beyond 9 was worse. Water crossed it in 3 places. The truck slid once badly enough that Leah shouted, and David grabbed the dash. Yvette held the military radio. Henry, talk to me. Pressure still climbing. We've lost 2 more monitoring sensors. Did they fail, or did the dam fail around them? We don't know. Then say we don't know. We don't know. Evacuation. 3 addresses unresolved. Which? He read them. The first was vacant. The second belonged to a family already confirmed at a shelter under a different name. The third was Frances Alden. Yvette closed her eyes. Find her. Cass came on. Governor, we cannot delay release for one unconfirmed resident. I did not say delay. I said find her. Fort Ransom's lights appeared through the rain at 9 minutes. She was out of the truck before it fully stopped, running. At 61, running was something she preferred to do privately and in better shoes. Today, nobody cared. She entered the command room at 6 minutes. Wet, mud-streaked, breathing hard. Every person in the room stood. Sit down. They sat. Bell pushed the release document across the table. Governor, hydraulic projections show 412 structures take water. Most first floors, some complete loss. And if we don't? I am no longer willing to predict that Ellery holds. She picked up the pen. Evacuation, Cass answered. All known residents in the spillway zone accounted for. Road crews clear, responders clear, nursing home evacuated, Delaney on high ground. Francis Alden. A pause. Unconfirmed. 5 minutes. Yvette looked at the map. 400 homes. Kitchens. Family photographs, medicine cabinets, marks on door frames where parents had measured children, a veteran's flag, a wedding dress, tools handed down, and one white farmhouse with a porch swing, where an 82-year-old woman might or might not still be sitting. Governor, Bell said, 4 minutes. She thought about what it would mean to write her name on this page, while a woman's whereabouts were a blank space in a column, and what it would mean not to. Then she signed. Open Spillway 3. Bell didn't move. Confirm authorization. I, Yvette Marchand, Governor of this state, authorize emergency release through Ellery Spillway 3, under Section 19 of the State Water Emergency Act. Confirmed. The operator at the dam turned the switch. The gate began to move. Water started screaming beneath it. Yvette stood perfectly still. There was nothing left for her to do. This was the strange cruelty of the job. Hours of decision ending in a moment where your only remaining task is to watch other people turn valves. Gate at 14, the operator said. 20. Bell watched the pressure line. It stopped climbing. Nobody spoke. Then it dipped. Barely. A fraction. Then again. Hold at 20. Rain beat on the roof at Fort Ransom. The reservoir elevation fell another fraction. Bell finally exhaled. Pressure's coming off the eastern abutment. Is the dam holding? For now. That was not my question. He looked at her. Yes. Across lower Mercer Valley, sirens sounded, not warnings to flee, but signals to crews that the release had begun. Water crossed fields first, then roads. It reached Mill Creek. The feed store flooded. The basement of Mill Creek Baptist filled. A row of small houses disappeared to their windows. Barns stood like islands. At the end of Mill Creek Road, a white farmhouse stood empty in the rain. Water climbed the porch steps, covered the swing, pressed against the front door, and went inside a home where someone had lived for 57 years. Nobody was standing there to watch. That was the point. It was also, for the next 40 minutes, not something anyone could promise Yvette Marchand. She did not ask. She stood at the map and took the 10-minute updates and did not ask, because asking would have told the room that the governor had signed a release with an unresolved address in the flood zone, and because the answer would not have changed anything she could still do. At 2:06, a shelter coordinator in Clearfield ran a name against an intake list. At 2:11, Cass put a hand on the back of her chair. Francis Alden. Left with her grandson at 12:40. She's in Clearfield. Yvette nodded once and kept looking at the map. Later she would tell exactly one person what that 40 minutes had been like, and it would not be a reporter. The dam held. The reservoir dropped. The rain weakened after midnight, and by sunrise the eastern joint had stopped moving. There were rescues across the state. There were injuries. There were families who lost nearly everything. But in lower Mercer Valley, every person in the spillway zone got out. Ruth Delaney arrived at Fort Ransom the next afternoon, in borrowed sweatpants and somebody else's coat. She looked terrible. Yvette looked worse. "You owe me a radio," Ruth said. "You nearly drowned. And you called while I was busy. I needed you." "Yes." Ruth's face changed. "What happened to the valley?" Yvette told her. "Francis? Safe. A beat. I didn't know that when I signed." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "How late were you?" 6 minutes. "Why?" "Checkpoint." "How long?" 41 minutes. Ruth stared. "What idiot?" "No. Yvette, somebody held the governor at a roadblock while a dam was failing." A soldier held an unverified vehicle because he was ordered to hold every unverified vehicle. He could have used judgment. He did. That was his judgment? He kept trying to verify me, and nearly ran out the clock. Yes. Ruth watched her friend a long moment. You're going to protect him. No. I'm going to tell the truth. The truth is, he stopped you. The truth is also that our entire authentication system assumed I'd have a working phone, a secure car, an open road, and a network that survived the exact conditions it was built for. Systems don't stand at barricades. No, people do. The story broke before noon. By evening it was national. Governor held at her own National Guard checkpoint during dam crisis. Then, the next morning, soldier refused to believe governor's identity. Cody Reese watched none of it. His commander ordered him off social media and moved him to a supply warehouse pending review. He asked one question. Did the dam hold? Yes. The valley? Flooded. People are safe. He nodded, went into a bathroom stall, sat down with his helmet between his knees, and cried for the first time since he was 14. His father picked him up 2 days later. They drove home in silence until a traffic light. You followed the order? Yes. You try to verify her. Yes. Could you have known who she was? Cody stared through the windshield. I don't know. His father nodded. That's probably the part you'll be thinking about for a while. Aren't you going to tell me I did the right thing? No. Why? Because I wasn't standing there. And anybody who tells you exactly what he'd have done when he wasn't standing there is usually selling something. 3 months later, the legislature opened hearings. The room was full before sunrise. Residents of Lower Mercer filled 3 rows, some carrying photographs, some wanting answers, some wanting somebody blamed. Cody sat near the back in his dress uniform. He had not wanted to come. His commander told him he should. For 2 hours, nobody mentioned Checkpoint 9. They talked about deferred maintenance, emergency funding, evacuation delays. Then Representative Harold Warren leaned into his microphone. Governor, you knew early that opening Spillway 3 would protect the dam. I knew it could reduce the risk. Yet you waited. To evacuate the lower valley as far as possible before deliberately sending floodwater into populated communities. You authorized release 6 minutes before the engineering threshold. Correct. Then let me ask it directly. If Ellery had failed during the 45 minutes you chose to spend evacuating 400 homes, 11,000 people would have been in the water. Would that have been an acceptable outcome? The room went very quiet. Yvette did not answer immediately. No. Then how do you justify the delay? I don't have a justification that would satisfy you if the dam had failed. I made a judgment with the information I had, and it was a wager, and I won it. If I had lost it, nothing I could say at this table would be worth hearing. Warren looked at her for a moment. That's an unusually honest answer. It's the only one I have. He turned a page. Let's discuss the checkpoint. How long were you delayed? She knew the number. Everyone knew the number. 41 minutes. By a 22-year-old private. Yes. And you're telling this committee he made no mistake? I did not say that. Was he wrong to keep you there? He followed the order he received. That sounds like a defense. It's a fact. Governor, facts still have consequences. They usually do. Warren set down his pen and picked up a different folder. Thin, 3 pages, marked with a committee exhibit stamp. Governor, are you familiar with the radio log from Checkpoint 9? I've read the summary. Then you know that at 12:30 that afternoon, 23 minutes before you arrived, Private Reese turned away a state police captain named Douglas Hartley. Yes. Captain Hartley also lacked movement authorization. Captain Hartley also argued. Warren looked up. Private Reese reached ransom control and confirmed Captain Hartley's identity in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The room did not move. You were there 41 minutes. Yvette said nothing. Do you have an explanation for the difference? Network conditions deteriorated between those 2 calls. They did. The technical review says the relay degraded significantly after 12:40. Warren nodded slowly. It also says Private Reese made 4 attempts on Captain Hartley's behalf in under 3 minutes, and 11 attempts on yours across 41, the first 6 of which were on channels that had already failed. He let it sit. Governor, I'm not asking you to read a young man's mind. I'm asking whether you believe the urgency he brought to those 2 calls was the same. Yvette looked at the exhibit on the screen, then, briefly, toward the back of the room. Cody was sitting very straight, too straight, like a young man trying not to disappear. No, she said, I don't. A camera clicked. Do you believe he intended a difference? No, I don't believe he was aware of one. She turned back to Warren. That is what makes it worth this committee's time. If he had been aware, this would be a disciplinary matter for one soldier, and we could all go home feeling that the problem had a name, and the name was not ours. And instead, a young man with no ill will toward me worked a broken radio harder for a white captain than for a black woman, and did not notice, and would have sworn under oath that he treated us identically, and he would not have been lying. Warren waited. Then who is responsible, Governor? She raised one finger. The people who wrote an authentication protocol with a single point of failure, a second. The people who issued a no-exceptions order without a functional escalation channel. A third, my administration, because all of it existed under my authority. And Private Reese? She lowered her hand. He is responsible for every choice he made at Checkpoint 9, including the ones he didn't know he was making. But, no but, she leaned toward the microphone. Responsibility is not a pie. Assigning some to a system does not remove it from a person. Assigning some to a person does not excuse the system. He could have asked different questions sooner. I could have demanded redundant authentication before the storm. His commanders could have written better orders. We all get to carry our part. Warren studied her. Do you forgive him? This is an emergency management hearing. It may matter to the public. Then let the public hear this instead. She paused. The most dangerous failure in an emergency is not always disobedience. Sometimes it is building a system where the only safe choice is obedience, and then handing that system to people who have never been taught what their own hesitation sounds like. Cody was waiting under the marble stairs outside the chamber. He'd expected her to leave through the private corridor. She came down the public staircase instead. He took off his cap. Governor, Private Reese, I wanted to apologize. Cameras pushed closer. She glanced at them. Not here. They walked 20 feet down the corridor. David Kim blocked the press. Cody stared at the floor. I've replayed it 1,000 times. Stop. He looked up. You will never improve a decision by punishing yourself with the memory of it. I lost 41 minutes. We lost 41 minutes. No, ma'am. And now I know why. She let that stand. Why didn't you let me through? Because I was afraid. Of me? No, he thought about it. Of being wrong. That's different. I told myself that if I broke the order and something happened, it'd be my fault. And if I followed it, it wouldn't be. There it was. The part the hearing had circled for 2 hours without touching. That is the mistake, she said quietly. I know. Do you? Yes, ma'am. I thought orders could carry responsibility for me. They can't. He nodded, then asked the question that had been living in him for 3 months. If I'd opened that barricade without confirmation, would you have defended me? She did not answer quickly. No. His face changed. I would have told the truth, that you violated a direct emergency order because you weighed the evidence in front of you and judged the risk of delay greater than the risk of passage. Would that have saved my career? I don't know. He looked almost relieved. She understood why. People rarely trust leaders who pretend every right choice comes with a reward. She put out her hand. He shook it. Your job isn't to avoid every decision that can hurt you, she said. It's to make the one you can still defend after the weather clears. A year later, she went back to Lower Mercer Valley without cameras. Some houses had been rebuilt higher. Some had been demolished. The feed store reopened in a metal building on the hill. Mill Creek Baptist replaced its pews with donated ones from 6 congregations across 3 counties. Frances Alden had rebuilt her porch. The swing was new. You finally brought a decent truck, Frances said. I've been criticized. They drank iced tea and talked about everything except the storm. The grandson starting college, the church organ still sounding wrong, the diner's blueberry pie getting worse since the owner's daughter took over. Then Frances looked out across the field. You know what I miss? My kitchen floor. Ugliest yellow tile you ever saw. My husband put it down in '78 and half the squares were crooked. She smiled. I spent 40 years telling him I hated it. The smile faded. Then the water came and peeled every piece off. I'm sorry. I know. Frances sipped her tea. Was there another choice? There were choices. That's not what I asked. No, not one I could live with. Frances nodded. That's what I figured. She reached over and touched Yvette's sleeve. People keep calling you brave. I signed a piece of paper. You signed away 400 homes. Yes, that sounds heavy. It is. Frances sat back. Good. Good? Means you're still carrying it. That evening, Yvette attended the dedication of a new emergency communications tower above Mill Creek. Backup power, satellite authentication, independent relays, portable biometric verification at every checkpoint unit in the state. No single lost vehicle could break the chain now, no single failed radio could isolate the system, and no 22-year-old would be handed a barricade and a rule without also being given a safe way to question the rule. Cody Reese came, still in the Guard. Still a private first class. He had declined the suggestion that the state commend him for discipline under pressure. I don't want to medal for a day we almost ran out of time, and volunteered for emergency communications training instead. He had become very good at radios. What do you think about when you see it? He asked, looking down the valley toward the repaired dam. The 6 minutes. Me too. That worries me. Why? Because you should also remember the people who got out. I do. Below them, the first evening lights came on across Mill Creek. New houses, old houses, a rebuilt church, a feed store on higher ground. 400 families had lost something because of a decision Yvette made. 11,000 people never learned what might have happened if she had made a different one. That was the strange mathematics of prevention. A disaster avoided leaves no ruins to photograph, no memorial, no names carved into stone. Only ordinary mornings that continue because something terrible did not. For the mornings you come home. She had thought those words were about Thomas. They had turned out to be about the job. Before leaving, she looked north toward the mountain road. Checkpoint 9 no longer existed. The barriers had been taken away months ago. There was only a narrow road winding up through the pines, and cars traveling it freely in the last of the light. Nobody stopped them. Nobody asked who they were.